Forget the headlines about peace talks and high-level meetings. Every single attempt is doomed to fail before negotiations even begin. The war in Ukraine has become a forever war, ever since 2014, with a diplomatic solution virtually impossible. The stark reality is that Washington cannot compel Kyiv and its European partners to accept a deal brokered with Moscow. For both Russia and Ukraine, there appears to be no ground for compromise, suggesting that the conflict's resolution will not be found at the negotiating table, but instead determined on the battlefield. So why is any potential peace still dead on arrival? And how are both Putin and Zelensky now locked into a forever war? If you're interested in learning more about what happens beyond the headlines, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, because in our world, every move matters. The very starting point for negotiations presents a major and immediate deadlock. The two sides hold completely opposite views on the nature of de-escalation. Moscow has been unequivocal in its position. It will not accept a mere ceasefire. Instead, Russia demands a long-term, final peace agreement that permanently settles the conflict on its own uncompromising terms. For Moscow, a temporary pause is insufficient because it would allow Ukraine to rearm and regroup with Western support, potentially reigniting the conflict later on more favorable terms for Kyiv. The Kremlin seeks to solidify its gains and objectives into a binding, permanent treaty to prevent such scenario. The only alternative from the Kremlin's perspective is the continuation of the war. On the other side, Kyiv and its European allies insist on a complete end to all fighting as an absolute prerequisite for engaging in any further discussions with Russia aimed at a long-term settlement. This demand reflects the fundamental distrust of Russia's intentions against the possibility of establishing again what Kyiv sees as a frozen conflict that Russia had once exploited. And it has exploited not only in Ukraine, but still does in Georgia and Moldova. So the fundamental disagreement on whether a ceasefire precedes a political settlement or vice versa creates an impasse before any major issues can be even addressed. Even if the initial hurdles can be overcome, the issue of territorial control represents an even greater barrier. Russia's territorial demands are uncompromising. Moscow seeks the recognition of its sovereignty over Crimea and the oblasts of Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Luhansk, regions it already largely or entirely controls. But Russia claims all the territory, even the ones it doesn't control. These claims are not merely strategic objectives, but have been enshrined in the Russian constitution, making any concession a significant political blow, especially as it currently holds the leverage on the battlefield. Moscow controls all of Crimea, nearly all of Luhansk, and a great majority of the annexed regions, and it is highly improbable that it would concede them. We have already done a previous report on Russia's strategic territorial objectives and why a buffer zone in Eastern Europe is an imperative for Moscow. Check it out in the description below. For Ukraine, it is out of the question to surrender any of the territories under its control as part of any agreement. Kyiv still holds major military fortifications and key Ukrainian strongholds like Kramatorsk and Slovyansk.
Russia is still unsuccessful in Donetsk region. Putin has been unable to take it for 12 years. And the constitution of Ukraine makes it impossible to give up territory or trade land.
Moreover, the Ukrainian leadership operates under the assessment that Russia's strategic objectives are not only in Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, but rather aim for the complete absorption of Ukraine and eventual control over Moldova. So Kyiv considers Moscow's terms on territorial concessions politically unworkable. This fundamental clash over land, rooted in state doctrine for one side and national sovereignty for the other side, makes any territorial compromise virtually impossible. And here's another dead end: security guarantees. These future arrangements form another area of complete opposition where no middle ground appears possible. The Ukrainian and the European position calls for the deployment of a military force into Ukraine as part of any peace agreement, a force that would be underwritten or backed by the United States. While Washington has indicated an openness to providing Article 5 style security guarantees, the specifics of which this would entail remain undefined. But this entire framework directly contradicts Russia's well-known red lines. Moscow's non-negotiable demand is for Ukraine to adopt a position of neutrality and be disarmed to the point of having no offensive military capabilities. Russia has been clear that it will never accept the presence of NATO or any other foreign troops on Ukrainian territory. From Kiev's perspective, accepting these Russian demands is impossible, as it would effectively leave Ukraine as a disarmed and vulnerable rump state with no meaningful security guarantees, exposed to a future Russian attack. The confluence of these incompatible positions on de-escalation, territory, and security guarantees creates a permanent state of stalemate. The demands presented by Russia are wholly unacceptable to Ukraine, as they would compromise its territorial sovereignty and future security. That is why a trilateral meeting between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky is unlikely to happen, much less yield any results. Kyiv is cautious to engage in negotiations that would legitimize Russian aggression, while Moscow refuses to recognize the legitimacy of Zelensky.
When you have to sign documents, we would need a very clear understanding by everybody that the person who is signing is legitimate. And according to the Ukrainian constitution, Mr. Zelensky is not at the moment.
At the same time, neither side currently faces the prospect of total defeat, which removes any urgent incentive to make the radical concessions necessary for a diplomatic breakthrough. Both Putin and Zelensky believe they possess the leverage to achieve their objectives. Russia points to its significant territorial gains, while Ukraine draws strength from the substantial military backing of its European partners and its growing capacity to strike Russian territory with domestically produced long-range weapons. In this context, the role of external powers appears to be more political theater than a source of practical policy. And when diplomacy fails and survival is at stake, it is the battlefield that renders the final verdict. This is just geopolitics. Is this the end of the line for a diplomatic settlement for the war? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to learn more about politics and international affairs, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.